Alright everyone, you're welcome back to another lesson on the discussion of harmony. So we want to talk about another topic in harmony in this lesson today. We're going to discuss about the passing tone or the passing notes. So a passing note could be accented passing notes or the unaccented passing notes, right? Basically, passing notes or passing tone is a non-harmonic note that creates a dissonance between two chords while filling the stepwise gap between these two chords. So it's a device to fill up a space between two chords. Say for instance, if a third appear between a given part of a chord to another chord, right? If the interval of a third appears here, occurs between these two chords in a given part, say soprano. So you can use a passing note to link these two notes so that you have a smooth stepwise movement of notes. So that's what passing note does, and in so doing, it usually creates a dissonance. Again, what is a dissonance? Dissonance is any note that creates tension or instability, notes that always yearn for resolution. It's a dissonance. It creates a kind of roughness in the sound. The most important thing is that dissonance usually sounds unstable to the listener, and it always calls for resolution whenever they occur because they are unstable. They usually create instability in a music progression. A good way to look at dissonance is any note that's not a member of a particular chord is a dissonance note, right? Or it's a dissonance. For instance, when you have the seventh of a C major chord, right? Which is B. So it's a dissonance. It sounds like a tension here that calls for resolution. Now let's talk about some facts about passing notes. So passing notes are non-harmonic or non-chord tone, right? Just like what I said earlier, they are not member of a triadic chord, right? So say C, E, G, G, B, D, F, A, C, A, C, E, B, D, F. So any note that is not a member of these chords is usually referred to as a dissonance, right? Passing notes are dissonance. Passing notes are usually dissonance. We're going to talk about the difference between accented passing notes and unaccented passing notes as we progress, right? So passing notes are approached and weighted by step between two chords. Of course, you enter into passing notes in step and you leave it by step also, so that you have a smooth movement like do, re, mi, right? Or re, mi, fa, or mi, re, do, or so it's any of this. Passing notes help to create a smooth melodic movement. When you have notes in stepwise movement, of course, they are perfectly smooth, right? Passing notes could be accented or unaccented passing notes, and that's what our next topic will be. So we're going to be talking about accented passing notes and the unaccented passing notes. What are they? So let's get right into it. When the dissonant note falls between two chords or the unaccented part of a chord, then it is called the unaccented passing note. That is, when the dissonant falls within two chords, this is called the unaccented passing note. That is, the passing note itself is between the two chords, right? So this is unaccented passing note. And let's see the example. And of course, in this case, it means the unaccented passing note itself leans or share from the note value of the first chord in this arrangement or a chord in this arrangement. So if the notes are moving in, say for instance, 8th notes before now, so it means in the case of passing notes, the notes are going to be doubled to 16th notes. So let's see it in this example. So you see the passing note in alto. So we have 4th notes, and ordinarily other parts moves in 4th notes, right? But because of the passing notes here, we have 8 notes in alto, and we see that it is unaccented because this note is a dissonance. That is, it's not part of this chord. So it yearns for resolution and it resolves upwards from E to F. So that's exactly what happens here. And this is called the unaccented passing note, or simply PT. So let's see how it sounds. So it goes, the E briefly creates a tension here, right? Right. So you see that this note sounds like a dissonance, like it's not part of this chord, right? Right. So it's a tension here, which means resolution, right? And again, it falls on the weak beat. It falls on the weaker beat of the chord. This is the strong beat, and it's weak. It's unaccented, right? Unlike the other one. So it's unaccented, and it's forming a tension there that needs resolution, right? So this is the unaccented passing note, right? So it's a form of embellishment or a kind of decoration to the notes that will make your notes sounds more interesting, right? So beyond that, dissonance usually portray an emotional depth, in so doing giving the music a sense of high expression in a piece of music. So apart from creating tension, it also portrays a high emotional depth to a piece of music. And here we have two unaccented passing notes. So it could also appears like this, but make sure you don't have consecutive fifths, consecutive octave, or consecutive unison here, right? So you don't want to break any rule. Always take note of that. So let's see how it sounds. So again, these two notes are not on the accent, they are not on the strong beat, they are on the weak beat. And that's why we call them unaccented passing notes, right? They appears on the weak beat. And again, two notes are not part of this chord. So they are dissonant to this chord, right? They are neither part of this chord nor part of this chord, right? So they are strange there, but just to create tension and quickly resolve to the next chord, right? So let's see how it sounds. So we have, all right. So unaccented passing notes or unaccented passing tones. So we also have this sounding this way. All right. So in summary, you can have your own accented passing notes in this order as a single dissonant note, right? But make sure you check for consecutive for these two notes that are going up. So we have a third here, and of course, there's no cause for alarm, right? But if these two notes have been the fifth unison or an octave, then you should also check in this case. So we have a fourth here, so there is no cause for alarm, right? But hadn't been this interval is a unison or a fifth or an octave, then you should also be worried about what happens here, because unaccented passing notes could also make you break the rules of consecutives. So you should always be very, very careful with that. So where your note is resolving to, you should also check such direction in other parts and ensure that there is no consecutives, right? Okay, now you can also have unaccented passing notes, both going down, right? You see that both tends to resolve downwards, right? So this is also very correct. And look at what happens here. The unaccented passing notes moves in contrary motion. So let's talk about what you should do and what you shouldn't do in terms of unaccented passing notes. And the first one, I've mentioned it the other time. Avoid consecutive octaves, because unaccented passing notes or passing notes in general will also lure you into the use of consecutive, or into the breaking of that rule of consecutive fifths, consecutive octave, or consecutive unison. So you have to be very careful. So let's see what happens here. Now, look at what happened between bass and tenor here is a fifth, right? Is a sixth here, but because of the unaccented passing note, is a fifth here, and it also moves into another fifth. This is wrong, right? So this should be avoided. So basically, you see bass and tenor moving in consecutive fifths here. So this is wrong and should be avoided, right? So let's try to correct it. So simply, it shows that the use of unaccented passing notes is not too good here in this case. So we should try to deal with it, right? So the first one sounds this way, right? I'm still hearing that fifth. The consecutive fifth is there, like, okay, so simply just leave it this way. This sounds better. Unlike consecutive fifths should be avoided, right? Passing notes generally is not really compulsory, especially when you say that you break a particular rule, right? So let's see what happens here. The unaccented passing notes are moving towards the same direction. They're moving upwards, and they are to the result upwards, right? Okay, they are present in both bass and soprano, right? But look at what happens here. The first one and the second one progress to an octave. So you have a consecutive octave there. So it's wrong. Should be avoided. So let's see how to correct this. So I can just leave it this way. Now let's see how it sounds. The first one goes this way. I can still hear the consecutive octave. It's not too good, right? But look at the sound here. So this is good. Okay, quickly, let's go to the next one. Always avoid augmented second in a given part. Augmented second is in soprano. So this is not too good. So you should rather write it this way, right? So this is fine. So you don't really need the passing notes there to avoid the sound of augmented second. Should be avoided. So the first one, the augmented second there is not too good, right? But simply play it like this. Beautiful. All right. Now, next class, we continue with the accented passing notes. All right. I'll see you in the next one.